Thank you guys for tuning in today. I am so excited about today's guest. Her name is Mint, and she is a somatic sexologist and pleasure-focused sex educator who focuses on empowering Middle Eastern women and couples who feel stuck in their sex lives worldwide. She's known for her daring initiatives and international presence. Mint has been transforming lives through her work and her unique approach to movement, teaching, and sexual education. Mint, welcome. I am so excited for our conversation because sex is one of my favorite topics to talk about. And it's such an important topic for various reasons. Aside from the obvious ones, it's such a taboo for so many people. And, there's a lot of guilt and shame and fear around sex for so many women. And disconnection between men and women, I think, in general, when it comes to sex and intimacy. So, Mint, tell us more about what you do and who you are.
Absolutely. Rachel, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really happy to be here and to speak to you. And I'm really excited for our conversation today. And I do agree. I mean, this is a very novel researched, under researched topic, and it's a very novel topic to talk about. There's only a handful of books and very recent available resources for people, really, and especially when it comes to the research, it's definitely an under researched topic. So I specifically specialize in pleasure. I specifically specialize in the challenges that people experience when it comes to pleasure, and also in the pleasure possibilities that are available for people. And so basically my job, summarized as somatic sexologist in one line, is my job is to help people have better sex, to help them reach all the pleasure possibilities that are available for them, and to help them understand what is even available.
That's so amazing and so insightful too, because I think, I always say to people in general, there are a lot of things that we don't get taught in school and sex or by our parents and how to do things in life in general. And sex is definitely one of those. And I think a lot of people, are not having great sex and are so disconnected because they don't know where to turn to. So I'm glad there's people like you out there that are starting a movement to be able to make this topic a lot less taboo, because it is one of the most important things in a relationship between people. And it could really, in my opinion, make or break a relationship or be one of the main factors that causes a deterioration between couples. So maybe let's get into, there's so many things we could cover here, but can we go into what are the most common themes that you see between couples? And then I want to get specifics into women. I have a whole bunch of questions around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm going to list down the most common issues that I see between couples, and that's just going to tell us a lot about the misinformation around sex, which is really like the most problematic problem that we have in our society today. So the most common things that I see between couples is, number one, there's a dynamic where one person wants more sex than the other, and then that causes a lot of tension and friction in the relationship. Another issue is feeling like the quality of the sexual experience, the quality of the erotic experience is not good enough. It might be that it feels a little bit boring. It might be that it's become predictable and a little bit of a routine. It might be that just like genuinely like the quality of pleasure isn't enough for someone to completely surrender and sink into. Another common problem that I find between people in relationships, which is actually, I feel, a little bit new in our world today, is the both parties don't want to hurt each other. And because they don't want to hurt each other, and because they have a lot of shame and feel a little bit embarrassed to share what they would like to experience with the other person, they hold back and they don't ask for what they would like or how they would like what they would like to try. Even if it's as simple as just being touched in a different way on your arm, it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but Most of the couples that I work with are very loving, very caring couples that genuinely care about each other's experience. And a lot of the time, it's just that they don't feel safe enough or confident enough to ask for that what they want without making the other person feel like they're not good enough.
That makes total sense. And what comes to mind too is just, I think like you mentioned, our society as a whole is very much, we're all in our heads and we're so disconnected from our bodies, and which I think is so important and is becoming more of a, I think people are becoming more open to this idea of the mind body connection and how important it is. And do you think that part of the issue is that people are not actually in their bodies? They're not like coming from a place of feeling and over mentalizing things. Obviously there's trauma, and then there's past experiences and things that could also prevent us from being confident and comfortable to speak what we want to our partners. So maybe when it comes to intimacy, what do you think people can do maybe to improve, or how do you help people with the somatic aspect too of being more comfortable and confident sexually?
So, one of the most common issues, and I think people don't even experience it even as an issue anymore, per se, is the inability to fully be present in a sexual and erotic experience. Distraction. Distraction is the biggest enemy when it comes to erotic experiences and really being able to sink into them and feel it all. I mean, essentially, that's what pleasure is all about. Pleasure is you being present in the moment and feeling the sensations and just really enjoying them. And so I think to a great extent, most people on the planet really struggle with this, regardless of their gender, regardless of their age, regardless of their upbringing, regardless of the environment that they're in. It is the most common block between you and how much pleasure you can essentially feel and how great the quality of your experience is. And I mean, distraction is definitely a part of our lives today in multiple other areas where, there are so many companies that are competing for our attention. So in a world where we're growing up and there are so many cues in so many areas of our lives to no longer be embodied, this is essentially the biggest problem, is that you go to the doctors and you say this hurts, and they run some tests and then they look at you and say nothing is wrong with you, you're fine, go home. But the reality is that your pain is definitely felt inside your body, but is being dismissed by someone who has a certificate and is qualified to say you're fine, go home. And then you see it where, as you grow older, having emotions and expressing intense emotions, whether it's happiness, whether it's sadness, whatever it is, the expression of intense emotion is no longer welcome and no longer comfortable in society. And you kind of just really have to like have your shit together all the time, right? And so there are so many different cues that teach us that it is not safe to be in our bodies and it's not safe for us to be embodied. And so it really is something that we learn outside of our sexual learning. It's something that we learn as we develop in this world that we're in today. And so, when it comes to sexual experiences, so many people depend on different kinds of stimulants and different kinds of numbing agents to be able to just quiet the mind and drop into the body and really feel the sensation. And it actually becomes very, very difficult for people to have sober sex and enjoy the experience fully because they have their inhibitions, there's a lot of shame, but also at the same time, the mind chatter is so loud that they can't just let go. I like to think of sex as the way that adults like to play. I mean, great sex is not going to make a fantastic relationship. However, crappy sex or a sexless relationship for two people that have a healthy temperament or like a medium to high temperament can definitely be a problem. So sex can ruin a relationship, but it definitely isn't going to make it. And the important thing about this here is it's so important for us to play with our partners. And sex is the area where we can do that, where you can be vulnerable and you can just like completely be yourself and you can let go and you can be unapologetically, the slut you want to be, or you can role play and pretend you're a queen. And there's so much fun there. And so it really keeps the relationship alive, but most importantly, it keeps us alive. It keeps our ability to play and our ability to let go and our ability to surrender like we did when we were kids. And, we pretend the floor is lava and we'd let our imagination run and it would just be so much
Hmm.
fun. That's kind of the way that adults play. And so when you take away these freedoms and when you take away people's ability to sit in their bodies and to be fully embodied and be comfortable in that, especially without being necessarily intoxicated to be able to arrive there, it becomes a real problem. And that's exactly, if I boil down what somatic sexologists do, that's exactly it. They help you stay in your body during erotic experiences so that you're able to really feel all the pleasure that your body has to offer. So you can essentially sense more.
I love that. And I think that just for the sake of people not knowing what it means to be embodied or to what somatics means, maybe can you give an example of the difference, maybe? I mean, I know you spoke about it in a general way, but maybe the difference of what it means to be embodied versus what it's not, because I think a lot of people are just completely unconscious and walking around oblivious to the state that they're in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I was definitely one of those people. I mean, I've found somatic learnings because I needed them, really. So yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way to explain it is this. Somatic basically is the study of the body, and it's the study of the body as a conscious being, not as something that is just purely physical. And so that is the difference between saying physical and between saying somatic. Somatic means that the body is alive, that we realize that the physical body has a soul inside it, and that there is consciousness within the body. So it's kind of like a more holistic approach to the body versus just looking at it as a physical mechanism. Now, if the meaning of embodiment is being fully present in your body and sensing your whole body. The most common thing that I hear is, I feel like my mind is on one page and my body is somewhere else and we're not connected. And if I bring it back to the topic we're talking about, which is sex, common things that I'll hear is, I really want to have sex with him, but I just don't know. I just don't feel inclined to. I love him so much, but I just don't have that desire. When I'm in the experience, I keep telling myself, relax, 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 but my body just won't relax, although I really want to. And you see in these statements, the thing that is the most common or the theme that you can see that is a pattern is it's the mind is on one page and the body is on another page. And it sounds like people are trying to give their bodies instructions from the mind, but the body is not on the same page and they're not connected. So the study of somatics, whatever department it's in, all it does is let's bring your body, put your body and put your mind on the same page, where both of them are the same, where you don't feel like your mind is pulling you somewhere and that your heart is pulling you somewhere else, where everything is on the same page. And that's really truly the meaning of feeling embodied. When you are embodied, you are able to completely sense. When you are embodied, you don't feel like your mind and your body are going in two different directions. When you are embodied, you understand yourself so well and your sense of self-awareness becomes much better. And it's not from a heady place that's full of thoughts. It's really from a place where you don't have fear of your emotion and your emotion is your friend and your emotions are actually helping you make decisions that serve you. And it's no longer a place of fear. Being inside your body doesn't feel scary anymore.
That's so helpful and such a great explanation. And I am nowhere near as knowledgeable as you, but I just know from my own experience how I used to feel. And just again, sex, when we're all learning how to do it, and when we start having sex with someone, no one again really teaches us. And I know a lot of men learn from porn, and you get these ideas of what sex is supposed to be like. And again, I have had experiences where I'm overthinking, and I couldn't allow myself to relax for someone to touch me or even engage in oral sex. And those, I just remember these experiences distinctly with, an ex-boyfriend that I had, that I finally learned how to relax and be more my body, whether it was through proper ways to become embodied. But yeah, and I just, from speaking to so many women, there are women that don't even have orgasms during sex, or if you want to bring in other issues sexually where their partner is only focused on their own pleasure and in not actually connecting with them, and it's like you're being used as just like a physical object to be someone else's receiving someone else's pleasure, basically. Yeah, I just think that this is such helpful information for people, because you could be going through your whole entire life not even having a good sexual experience, when, I mean, why even do it
Yeah.
if you're not going to enjoy it,
Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely. And I mean, the thing is also here is that there's two parts of it, especially around female orgasm, right? Because on one side, you have the real problem that the way that we've learned, where we've learned to pleasure women is today primarily the internet, right? And it's primarily in porn. And so what happens is most men learn about pleasure either through porn, or they might be lucky enough to have met a woman who said, no, my friend, let me show you how. Let me show you how
Mm-hmm.
it's done. And these are like the best men to date, because you're like, yes, please, I really want to be with a man who a woman has shown what to do, right? And so the problem is that what happens is,
Exactly.
even if a man really wants to pleasure a woman and his focus is on, I want this to be an amazing experience for you, because the learnings have come from porn, and also because of the lack of availability of other resources for him to learn how to pleasure a woman, the result ends up, well, I'm doing all the things, but it's not working. And then she kind of starts to feel bad and feel a little bit frustrated, or that something's wrong with her, because she's also watched porn and she's also seen some movies, and she's supposed to automatically suddenly feel all this pleasure in the world, especially when intercourse happens. And so then the reaction there becomes, well, I have to fake it because something's wrong with my sexual response, right? And so there's a very big problem here with the lack of education, the lack of not only sexual education, but the lack specifically of pleasure education that is around women, available around the female orgasm, available around female pleasure, and available around just cisgendered women, like who struggle with the fact that around the world, not many people really know how to pleasure a vulva. Not many people with a penis know how to pleasure a vulva, right? And so there's
Mm-hmm.
that problem. Now, the other thing is just, and the other part to this is the emphasis of orgasm, because orgasm doesn't equal pleasure, and orgasm doesn't equal an incredible erotic experience. I mean, there was a client of mine who contacted me and said, hey, listen, I've been in this long-term relationship, I hardly ever orgasm, I maybe only orgasm twice, and I'd really like to work on that. And so my question to her was, well, can you please recall your top 1 to 3 erotic experiences in this specific relationship? And she recalls them and she shares them with me. And I ask, are any of these the ones where you had an orgasm with your partner? And the answer was no. And typically this is the case, and this is another problem in our society as well, is that we kind of, orgasm is the finish line. We say, okay, once you've orgasmed, now we're done, which isn't the
Mm-hmm.
case. And then orgasm has also become a place where we want to arrive. We want to get there. But in reality, you can have incredibly, incredibly powerful erotic experiences that might not even involve any touch, that might not even involve orgasm, right? And so that's the issue. The issue is the lack of education around orgasm and how to deliver an orgasm and how to pleasure a vulva and how to pleasure a vagina versus a penis. And then the second problem is sex does not equal orgasm. Orgasm is not the destination where we want to go. And just because an orgasm has happened doesn't mean that you've had the best erotic experience of your life. And so we've really limited the definition of sex, and we've really limited the definition of pleasure, whereas there's so much more. And that's where lots of people who have tapped into their pleasure and really tapped into their sexuality and really explored and played get left out, or people who have found different pathways for pleasure get left out, and they feel like they're the weirdos, like there's nobody for them to play with, and that there are other pathways to pleasure, you know, be it spanking or different kinds of fetishes or, energetic play. They feel like something's wrong with them and that there's no space for them in the sexual playground.
Yes, and if we want to talk for, everyone has a different level of comfort with intimacy. So again, not trying to single anyone out if you're not ready or you're, at a different level sexually than another person might be. The idea of understanding this information and learning about sex is also allowing yourself to become more familiar with you and make yourself vulnerable, so that you trust yourself and that you can trust another person with the most intimate and vulnerable parts of you. I mean, I don't know if there's anything more vulnerable than being completely naked in front of another person and letting them see all of you, bearing your soul in a way to them. Because I do think when you have sex, you are literally becoming connected on a soul level with someone when you're experiencing that level of intimacy. So that in itself is important, because I think the more that you can become vulnerable and also know yourself and trust yourself, it not only in your sex life but in all areas of your life, I think it can really teach you about yourself and allow you to be more confident in ways that someone might not initially expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, step one is getting to know yourself. And I think that's something that especially people in partnered relationships don't realize. A lot of the time, you come in with your partner and you think that, you need to work on the dynamic between the two. And sure, yes, absolutely, we can get there. But step number one for anybody who's in a partnered relationship or not in a partnered relationship is just to get to know themselves. What do I enjoy? What do I not enjoy? How important is sex for me? What is my sexual temperament? I actually have a course that does this, which is basically called Your Erotic Map, and I think that's really step one. Step one is understanding your own erotic map. How do I like to be touched? What are the different languages that I like to play in? Am I more sensual? Am I more energetic? Am I more sexual? Like, where is it? Where is the field, right? And on top of that as well is really just kind of connecting with your own self and being able to receive that pleasure when it's available or when it's given to you by someone else, but most importantly also when it's given to you by yourself. There is so much that self pleasure says about a person's relationship with their own sexuality and with their own pleasure. And what you see is people who typically will maybe watch something for stimulation and will typically just kind of rub it out really quickly, and who will touch themselves and bring themselves to a really quick orgasm in, between 1 to 2 to 5 minutes at most, right? And so one of the first things that I'd say is, let's slow down. What if self pleasure was no longer a 5 minute rush? What if it was more like a 15, 20, 30, explore the whole body, really feel every single touch. Let your mind go wherever it wants to. Let your mind also place the consciousness where you're being touched and how that feels like. And that in itself helps you become more embodied in partnered experiences, and it helps you expand. And one of the most common things that I hear specifically from women in partnered experiences is they'll say, Mint, I just don't know if it's me or if it's him, right? And it becomes very, very problematic. It becomes very problematic because you don't know if it's you don't know if it's your partner, you don't know if it's the dynamic of both of you together, and it gets very confusing. However, when you know yourself really well, when you're very embodied, when your self pleasure experiences are prolonged, you're very conscious during them, and you consciously self pleasure. And when you've done a lot of exploratory work to understand what feels good in your body and what sensation feels like a yes and what sensation feels like a no and what sensation feels like maybe, then you know, oh, okay, today I was off and therefore I wasn't ready to receive XYZ. Today I felt his energy and I felt like he was just trying to make it work and it just wasn't, working. Or like you just begin to understand what is me and what is the other person and what is maybe both of us. Both of our dynamics aren't working. And I think that's very, very healthy. And that I think that can help people and actually cut people a lot of wasted time and a lot of worry that doesn't necessarily have to be in that way.
Yeah, and you mentioned two things. So, receiving. I think that is again something that a lot of people aren't even comfortable with and may not realize that as a woman specifically, our and I think that is like dropping into the feminine, being open to receiving, right? So I think there is a big, I don't want to say it's fear, maybe guilt is the emotion that is connected to this when you almost, not that you don't feel like you deserve it, but maybe on some unconscious level you're not open to receiving, which can also become a block. So I think I like that you had mentioned that and spoke about that. And then the other thing was, I can't remember what the other thing was off the top
Okay,
of my head,
that's all right.
but just, yeah, being open to receiving, I think, is another thing that you as a woman too should be curious, like how open are you to receiving pleasure from not only yourself but from someone else as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, especially when it comes to receiving for women, that really is a real challenge. And I think we just need to take a step back and empathize. Empathize with the experience of being a woman on this planet and the messaging that is around it that doesn't help you experience. Because I mean, for all genders, everybody is living on a planet where disembodiment is definitely a part of our human experience today. However, when it comes to women specifically, and there's a fantastic book by Emily Nagoski that talks about this called Come As You Are, and there's another new book that came out called Come Together that I really recommend. She is a fantastic researcher, and she realized that there are three very main messages that surround women's sexuality that really affect their experiences. The first one is the medical message, which is here's how it's supposed to work. You're suddenly supposed to feel horny, out of the blue. Suddenly there's these tingles and you feel horny, and it better be at the same time as your male partner. And then what's going to happen is as he gets hard, you should get as turned on as that and be ready to receive him fully inside. And then there's a very specific process that happens. So he goes inside and then you feel the feels all that much more, excitement rises, and then you come, he orgasms, you orgasm, and preferably at the same time, right? And so unless you're experiencing sex in that specific process in this specific way, you begin to think, well, something's wrong with me, right? And the other medical message is listen, if you want to be a sexually active woman, if you want to be an erotic woman, then, you better only be as erotic as your partner at the times that are convenient for your male partner in the way that your male partner wants. And by the way, there's a very real fear of pregnancy. And by the way, there's a very real fear of STDs. And so, cross your legs, because if you're sexually active, especially with multiple people, you're going to die. Right. And that's really, really
Mm-hmm.
scary. It literally makes it scary for you to kind of just open your legs, kick back and relax, right? When you're worried about
Yeah.
all these potential things that might happen to your body because you had a little bit of fun and play. The second message that happens is the media message. And the media messaging is very strong because to this day, Rachel, I am yet to meet a woman who is happy with her boobs. Like I don't know what is the perfect breast size, because I meet women with beautiful breasts, and it doesn't matter how big or how small they are. Every single woman I know thinks her breasts are either too big or too small, right? But there isn't one woman that I've met who's like, I have great tits and they're amazing. And the few, like the handful of women that feel this way about their breasts are definitely women who have done a lot of work around their body image in general, right? But that's the media messaging. The media messaging always tells you are not enough. You're not beautiful enough. You're not tall enough. You're not short enough. You're not skinny enough. You're not fat enough. You're not this, that. You're not healthy enough. You might be skinny, but you don't look like you're toned. And there's so many messages. And so whatever happens, you feel like you're not good enough. And obviously that shows up in the bedroom for sure. Um, and so it becomes really, really difficult. And then when it comes to the cultural messaging around the woman, it's all right, well, the only feelings you should have around sex is zero.
Hmm.
Because whatever other feelings you have about sex, that makes you a slut. And nobody
Yeah.
wants to be with a slut forever, right? And so
No.
that's it.
Yeah.
And the only feelings you should have around your sexuality is, oh, I want to share it with the love of my life who's going to put a ring on my finger. And that's it. But outside of that, you're a slut. Yeah.
Exactly. You become the whore, like, the archetype of this this
Yeah.
message that's been throughout history given to women who engage in any type of like sensual or intimate, or I'm sorry,
Yeah.
sexual activities with men
Yeah.
outside of marriage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which then creates so much shame. So I think too, with especially with Instagram and comparing yourself to like this perfect ideal image of what it means to be beautiful, I think that's a big part too. And that happens with female anatomy, like you mentioned, people's women's breasts, but also women's vaginas, the way that they look, the way that they
Yeah.
smell, I hear things, the way that, all these different factors that go into you being comfortable on a physical level to expose your body to someone's eyes, to see you naked in that way
Oh, yeah.
before you even
Absolutely.
get involved in any kind of activity.
Absolutely. And scientifically, it really brings us back to how sexual experiences work. We have a dual control model in our bodies that controls how incredible erotic experiences are for us. So I want you to think that there is one control, that's the turn on, how turned on am I? And then there's another one, which is turn off. And ideally you want the turn on to be all the way, and you want the turn off to just be completely like non-existent, right? Because if you feel super turned on, but then there are other things that are holding you back and turning you off, then you're going to start worrying and you won't be able to let go and completely drop into your experience. And just through our conversation today, we already know that things that will turn us off, especially as women, will look like, oh my God, am I going to get an STD? Is it too soon? Am I sleeping with him too soon? Is he is he going to think that I'm not worthy of being with because it's too soon? Is this angle okay? Do I smell okay? Does my pussy look fine? Does my
Mm-hmm.
vagina feel all right? Does it feel tight enough? You see, there's all these stories, and none of them are necessarily personal, right? These are impersonal messages that have been given and sent to women globally around the world that really make it very, very hard to let go, because your turnoff is being fueled right now. And that's one of the very first things that causes distraction, because your mind is thinking about all these things. I'm moving now. Am I jiggling? Does it look like all these jiggles are like unattractive? Does my orgasm face look fine? Am I moaning too loud? Do I sound weird? And so
Mm-hmm.
all these things are making it difficult to let go. And these are just the standard things that apply to all the women on this planet that don't necessarily apply to men, right? And so when we talk about letting go, we just first have to empathize for a moment and recognize that there is so much unlearning to do.
Yep. And I think it's simple. It can be like this can look like an overwhelming challenge or feat for people, but I think like you said, through this conversation right now, being able to bring these little demons that we all, these bad stories that we tell ourselves that are hiding in the, just ready to tell us how we're not enough and criticize us. If we bring them into the light, I think it's the first step of just really being able to question if these things are true and allow us to overcome them. So thank you for sharing all of that, because I think it's really useful, and it doesn't have to be this big scary thing. I think even just exploring these different avenues and questioning yourself, do I do this? Is this, you said so many things that at one point early on in my sexual experience, I didn't want to have sex with the lights off. And now I'm like, I'll just show the whole world. It's like a
Yeah.
process, and it takes many years to get there. And it does start with you being comfortable with you and accepting yourself. So I think, like you mentioned, that first step of all the things that you just mentioned, whether it be, do I worry about what my vagina looks like, or all, like, being conscious of the thoughts that go through your mind before you even engage in sex, when you begin that process with a partner. One thing I do think is very important that I wanted, that you mentioned before, that just came to mind, was when women start questioning, oh, do I need to be turned on at the same rate as my partner if I'm not ready when he's ready? Like, all these things happen. But I think to not leave men out too, maybe to help some men that might not be very knowledgeable, rightfully so, because a lot of women can't voice what feels good and can't even guide their partner in their own bodies because they're too embarrassed, or they don't know what feels good to them. There is a difference for men and women. Men don't need a lot of time to get warmed up and to be ready to have sex. I think they get turned on sometimes, or maybe most times, quicker than women do. And women, it's like we need to be warmed up. And I think if men can just understand that, and then women as well, knowing that it's going to be a little bit of time to get you warmed up to be able to enjoy sex or have an orgasm. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely can. So, I mean, depending on the sexual temperament of the person, that will determine how quick it is, or how slow it is for them to get turned on, regardless if they're male or female. However, what it is that the female genitalia, the female genitals in general, they need time to become plump as well. They need time to be able to receive a penis inside. So I might be turned on. If I have a high sexual temperament, let's say, getting turned on is not difficult. I can get turned on just like this, right? However, just because
Mm-hmm.
I'm turned on, it doesn't mean that I'm ready for intercourse per se. And I think that's the thing. When we say sex, we usually mean penis inside vagina, but we need to actually expand our definition of the word and expand what the word sex actually means. And so when I refer to the word sex, what I mean is an erotic experience. Intercourse, however, is something completely different. And so what it is that for people who have female genitals, they need time to be able to actually receive a penis inside. We need time to stimulate the whole area. We need time for the glands to start producing that liquid and for it to actually be spread in the vagina and to lubricate it. We need time for the clitoris to become fully erect. The same way that the penis becomes erect, the clitoris becomes erect as well. And so that takes a little bit of time for the blood to start flowing, for things to start happening, needs at least 10 minutes, at least like minimum 10 minutes. And each woman is different than the other, and each woman likes to be stimulated different than another woman. And so actually the best way to learn about how to stimulate a woman and how to have her ready for intercourse and ready to receive a penis inside is to really get feedback from her. And while there are many while there are many women who might not necessarily feel comfortable to say, do it this way and do it that way, and I hope that in long-term relationships they can eventually get there, there are other ways that we communicate. Sex is a body-based activity, and so why is it that we forget that breath, the way that someone breathes, tells us whether this is nice or this isn't nice? Even the moments where they hold their breath gives us information. Sound. I might not be saying words, but the sounds that I'm making are definitely saying, okay, yeah, that feels good. No, that doesn't feel so great. So the way that somebody's moaning. Another
Hmm.
thing is the movement of the body. Is she arching her back? Are her legs dropping? Are they opening and relaxing? Or does her butt feel tight? Do her quads feel tense? Because if the butt's tight and the quad's tense, that's a sign that it's not great. Or even if there's zero movement, if there is zero movement in my body and I am not reacting at all, that definitely means that I have left my body. I am not there, my friend. And so even lack of movement can tell us stuff. A body that is where the chest is opening, where the back is arching, where the muscles are relaxed, how are the facial expressions? They say a lot as well. So you can actually get a lot of information just through sound, movement, being very observant, listening to the breath, listening to the way someone moans, watching the way someone's moving. That can tell you a lot about what they enjoy and what they don't enjoy. And then that brings us into a deeper, more intimate, more connected experience where it's so beautiful because you don't have to speak to feel like the other person understands you and understands what you want. And it becomes almost like a body dance. And that's the thing. I think the best way to address pleasure and to expand pleasure and to give people and help them have much better pleasure experiences is actually addressing it through the body the same way that they experience it as well, for us to become fluent at communicating without words necessarily. And it isn't that difficult to be able to be completely embodied and to no longer be distracted and to know what is you and what is the other, and all those things they're not that difficult. I actually exclusively work online. My clients live all over the world, and I just teach them practices that are customized for them to help them bridge that disconnect, so that there's like this clear neurological path through their body that allows them to completely fully feel, and that helps them kind of remove all these weeds in the garden of information that they involuntarily ended up carrying for all those years. We unlearn it. So the easiest way to say it is if you work with a somatic sexologist or if you work with a sexological body worker as well, these two experiences are basically just a software update. Let's update your software. Let's update the software of the body, and let's really have a body that is operating on a software that is working for what you would like it to carry, and let's unlearn all these things. And it can all be done online. You don't even need to go anywhere. So it is accessible. It is not that tough. I mean, it's not that hard. You can do it, and it's not that complicated.
I thank you for sharing. So, any of you that are interested and you are not living where Mint is, you can definitely still have access to her and work with her. And I just wanted to, before we kind of wrap up, because I don't want to keep you too long, I could speak to you for hours about this topic. You mentioned some books. So, what are some resources that
Mhm.
you found super helpful that people can go to aside from working with you, just to start maybe scratching the
Yeah,
surface of this process of
absolutely.
deconditioning?
There's a couple of books that I really, really think are essential. So I'll say which each book is for. So the first book that I would recommend for anyone who really would like to get updated with the latest scientific information around female pleasure is Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. It's a fantastic, fantastic book, and it's available worldwide, and it's a really beautiful read. And she even has these little summaries at the end of each chapter, which is kind of, like a summary of what the chapter is about. So it's beautiful, and she's funny, which I like. Um, Another book that I would recommend is by Jaya, and it's about blueprints. And I really enjoy specifically about this book the fact that it acknowledges that different people have different sex languages. So the same way that we started learning about love languages that people have and understanding that people express and receive love in different ways, this is a book that really helps you understand how different blueprints work. And she has an entire empire that she's built around this, you know. Something else that I highly recommend, and it's not a book, it's a Netflix show, is Sex, Love, and Goop. So, Sex, Love, and Goop is incredible because it shows multiple couples but with different genders, different dynamics, different ages, different issues, and also shows different approaches by different practitioners in the sexual realm, you know, and how they address each problem. And I think this is just a beautiful series to watch because it teaches us a lot and it makes us see how there are different approaches to different scenarios. And I think that's like a really nice way to learn as well. Um, Another book that I highly recommend for couples actually is a book by Esther Perel, which I found was a really compelling read, which was called Mating in Captivity. And it's just an interesting read to understand how our eroticism in today's world looks a little bit different and how we have come here and how we are, you know, with this one person sharing our body and the struggles that come around it, and especially around long-term relationships, you know, the struggles that happen there. Emily Nagoski has also written a book called Come Together, which is the latest research on how to keep eroticism alive in a long-term relationship, which I feel is very important there as well. The final book that I'd like to recommend for anyone who is interested in maybe opening up their relationship or has this desire to maybe have multiple partners but really doesn't know what to do or just is curious about reading about it in general is a book called The Ethical Slut. The authors of these books have been on this planet for a long time, but importantly, part of this community for a really, really long time. And they offer advice around what you need to communicate. You know, they offer advice around how like that might impact your lifestyle. You know, they offer advice around, for example, how this might not be for everybody and that there are certain skill sets that you must have before you choose to have multiple partners or multiple lovers. And they also showcase this spectrum because it's a very wide spectrum. You know, an open relationship could look like many, many different things, and a polyamorous relationship could look like many, many different things. So these are kind of like my favorite books in a nutshell.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. And Jaya, how do you spell that? And what was it? It was called Blueprint or?
Yes. So it's Jaiya.
Mhm.
And the book is called Your Blueprint for Pleasure.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's 5 different blueprints basically. And there's a really, really fun quiz. There's a super fun quiz that you can do to find out what your blueprint type is. And it gives you a report and it tells you all the different percentages. And it's actually in the info link that I shared with you as well. So it'll probably be, you know, right under the podcast. And it's super, super cool. It taught me a lot about myself. I really, really like it, especially the reports, because it tells you how to play with different people that have different languages and all the different things that you can do together and what your superpowers are that you haven't tapped into and what maybe your shadows are. So areas that might commonly hold you back. And I think it's something fun to do. It's like a 10-minute quiz. You just sit, fill it out, and it's done.
Amazing. I love this. Well, Mint, thank you so much for sharing all that information. I think we gave our listeners a lot to consider today and a lot of really useful and helpful information. And thank you for sharing your resources with us. Mint, if people would like to get in touch with you or potentially work with you and see kind of what courses you offer, can you share more about what it is that you specifically offer and where they can find you?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking me. So I work online exclusively and I help women and couples be able to have all the pleasure that they want, to be unapologetically erotically free without feeling like they're holding back or that they're stuck. And so I do this through two mediums primarily. One is my one on one sessions, and that's primarily for people who have problems and really need kind of one on one work to be able to work through their issues. And I do this with women and I do this with couples as well. The second thing that I do is I'm a pleasure focused sex educator. So I offer different courses that help people learn so much about pleasure. One of my favorite courses is called What You Wish You Knew About Pleasure. And I feel like that's like my favorite. If anybody asked me, what is the one that I should definitely do, like the top one, the one where I see the most results, it's definitely this one. And basically, it's so important because a lot of the time I receive clients who actually don't have issues, but we're just not educated around how pleasure works. So it teaches you how pleasure works in the female body, how it works in the male body. We do a little bit of anatomy. We also do a lot of psychology work on it. We explain how pleasure works, what affects our pleasure positively and negatively, how different types of people function. And there's a little workbook with it as well. But yeah, essentially, it's one of both. The easiest way to reach me is through the link that I have shared with Rachel here. So you should find it in the
In the
text
show
of the
notes.
podcast. Yeah, in
Mhm.
the show notes. And yeah, and that's basically it.
Well, can you, as far as social media goes, in case people want to find you, can you give us that info?
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way to find me is on Instagram, and my name is Mint Elmokadm. Let me spell that out for you. So Mint and then Elmokadm. My account is private. However, if you request to follow me, I will probably accept you. So you don't need to worry about that. But yeah, I live in Egypt, and so it has to be private.
Perfect. And then do you have a website that if they wanted to find your courses?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a website and it's really simple. It's just don'tfakeorgasms.com.
Perfect. I
Yeah.
like that title.
Yeah.
Well, Mint, thank you again so much. It was such a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope we do it again sometime. Yeah, thank you to everyone for listening.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute honor speaking to you. And I hope that we have another conversation again in the future soon.